Abundance.
Hey, this is Christopher Schreck.
And I'm Landon Metz. Welcome back to the Abundant Zine podcast.
Today, we'll be speaking with Isabella Lalonde, a New York-based designer who produces ornate handmade jewelry and accessories through her label, Beepy Bella.
Isabella's style is intricate and experimental, but also playful, genuine, and free. Centering her practice in personal ideals of utopian fantasy and magical symbolism, Isabella uses her work to explore her own internal landscape, and she designs her pieces to help others do the same.
Art takes many forms and can serve any number of functions, but I know that for both of us, one of the most exciting and fulfilling things about art is its capacity to enchant the world for its audience. When a work resonates, it can be a source of renewal, a reminder of possibility, and even a catalyst for new personal trajectories. And these are exactly the terms in which Isabella talks about her own work, so it's a pleasure to have her as a guest today.
In this episode, we speak with Isabella about celebrating the subconscious, translating personal vision into collective reality, and approaching a commercial brand as an ever-evolving art piece.
Thanks for listening.
Hey.
Hi Isabella.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Do you prefer Bella or Isabella?
I actually don't mind. I just kind of use Bella when I feel like it and Isabella when I forget to use Bella. So, whatever you want.
Was Beepy part of a nickname you had growing up?
No, it actually came from a really early morning. I woke up at 5 a.m. and I had to go to the airport. And instead of saying sleepy, I just started to say beepy for some reason. And I was with my partner at the time and we just used that word a lot after. And I made my Instagram handle that. And it kind of just took off from there. When I had my jewelry brand, I was like, what should I call it? And people had been calling me Beepy just because I guess it like resonated with them for some reason, that word, and just happened kind of accidentally, I would say.
Organically.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you go by Beepy too?
Yeah, a lot of my friends call me Beepy or Beepy Bella. They call me by my brand. I'm not mad about it.
The spot that I dropped the mic off at, was that your apartment or your studio or both?
Yeah, it's like a home studio. I kind of think about it like as a treehouse in the middle of the woods, and I just work where I kind of live, which is nice because I can, go into the studio at any hour and kind of create art, which I tend to make at, like 2 or 3 a.m. sometimes. But yeah, that was my home studio.
Cool. Hey, who is Eve?
That's my assistant.
How long has she been working with you?
She's been working with me for about a year now. Her full name's Eve Moon, which I think is really cool.
That's her real name?
Yeah.
That's so crazy.
Well, how has that been? Because I know at the beginning of, from the outset of the brand, you were kind of handling everything on your own.
It's been really good. I mean, there's only so much one person can do, even if you're, very ambitious and can handle a lot of different tasks. You get to a place where it's going to hinder your own growth if you don't kind of outsource help. So it's been really nice because it's almost like I have like an extension of myself that, I can use whenever I feel overwhelmed with certain tasks, or like I can't like switch my mindset going from wholesale accounts to posting on Instagram to like making a piece of art. There's a lot of different like mindsets you have to be in. So I would say more than anything, it's been beneficial towards like being able to accommodate more mindsets on a daily basis.
It's also kind of a form of self-love to acknowledge that you need help, right?
Yeah, I know. It's hard because I really enjoy working alone too. Like I'm definitely like a loner in that way in my art practice. Like I need to be like, like kind of like nighttime, like I feel like I'm the only one in the world and I'm like creating from like this like weird sort of, I don't know, like freedom you have from feeling like you're like one of the only humans on the planet and you're there to make art. And it's like this ethereal experience. So yeah, to go from that to working with other people on a daily basis for my brand is, it was like a learning curve for me to figure out how to still be able to be myself in those ways. But yeah, it is a form of self-love. Agreed.
And you've been talking about it in terms of your art practice. And I think one of the things that we were both interested in was, obviously you're primarily known for these wearable pieces that you're putting out through Beepy Bella, but your formal training is actually in studio art. And I think we were both interested to hear about that background and how that's informed your current practice. So maybe just to start at the beginning. So you did your undergrad
at Parsons.
And so what kind of work were you making at the time?
So, towards the end, senior year for thesis, I was making a lot of performance art and video art. And I would basically build sets, like weird set design, kind of like Blue's Clues inspired. You feel like you're in this weird surrealist world. And I would film myself acting as a character within that world. And often I'd like do things like green screen myself onto the same set. So I'd be interviewing myself as different characters dressed in different ways. Like I was like a plant interviewing myself as a witch and talking about, anything from my first period to fashion to fine art to how it feels being a girl in this world and stuff like that. So it was very autobiographical, I would say, and experimental. And the reason I got into jewelry was actually because I was, I had this idea where I wanted to test my limits as one person. Like I wanted to see how many things can I do myself? Can I make the clothes for my characters? Can I make my own set design? Can I film myself? Can I grow the mushrooms that I use visually within my video? And I also wanted to make my own clothes for my performance art characters. So I started to make jewelry as a way for my characters to wear like weird objects around their necks. And it kind of just evolved from there, which is cool because it happened really naturally and organically through my art practice.
Yeah. So you would consider, even though Beepy Bella obviously has a commercial function as well, you would consider this an extension of your art practice.
It's 100% that. I mean, if I wanted to be more commercially minded, it'd probably be better for the business long term, but for me it's only about the art. And even the way that I look at things, for instance, like posting on Instagram, I kind of think about it as if I'm like hijacking that space as an artist. Like I'm really interested in the business model as an artist that's kind of trying to hack it and see like how much of my own creative practice can I bring to these things that are completely opposite of it. For instance, like emails or business relationships or websites. And that's why I think people gravitate towards my work, because I look at every single opportunity within business as a way to challenge myself as an artist to overcome like the very like mundane base of it and see what I can do like to kind of make it more interesting and turn it on its head and make people have like a second look at what I'm doing within that world.
It becomes a medium in its own right.
Exactly. I always think about that. Like even for Instagram, as an example, like, you have a 4:5 ratio you can post in. So for me, that's like a blank canvas. And as an artist, I'm like, okay, what can I do with this? Knowing it's going to be, received on Instagram, on a phone usually. And what can I do to like make people kind of like think twice when they see an image that kind of pops up? It's very interesting. And I have a lot of fun with it because I'm not holding myself to like any standards of commercial success.
Or even like boundaries within certain sort of like hierarchies of art and design and whatever. I think there's like a real flexibility there.
Yeah, there definitely is. And, it's kind of like an uncharted territory because we're, social media blew up. I didn't learn about social media in college, which I think I should have as an artist. It's like extremely important. your relationship to it, even if you hate it, is a relationship to something that you know is important as an artist to have or to not have. You kind of have to like make that decision. And I think, there is a lot of room for like flexibility and experimentation on that platform, even through like a behind the scenes conceptual thinking that people might not know about.
But there does seem to be like a consistent sort of form of storytelling too that's happening, like a relationship to mythology or something.
Yeah. I don't know. It's kind of always been like that for me. Like I've always loved mushrooms and I've always loved fairies and frogs. Like I used to write essays about frogs in like elementary school, and those symbols kind of helped define me to other people as like a little bit of a weirdo. Like I always, use like mushrooms and frogs as a way to let other people know that I like, maybe like think about energy in a different way or magic in a different way. Like I do believe in fairies, and nature is a really important part of my inspiration and the way that I like root myself to this planet, even like as a person who's existing on it. So I always like think about ways that I can, in a very inviting and approachable way, kind of bring people into my own like belief system as someone who finds it really surreal to be, like alive on this planet in a galaxy. I'm always like kind of like mind blown by that fact. And I'm like, how do I like portray that emotion in a way that's like tangible and maybe a little bit more like easy to get into from an outside perspective?
The connection to natural environments is an interesting one because I guess for two reasons. First being that you've talked elsewhere about your appreciation of Plantasia, the Mort Garson album.
Yeah.
Which is like one of my all-time favorite records.
Nice.
Yeah, and I've always loved this idea of making something that's intended for plants as much as human listeners and the sort of the equation of the two. And I feel like that extends to the work that you've done as well. I would say also in the context of your work, this larger interest in exploring and connecting with natural environments, I wonder what your experience of that is living in New York and, how you've sought that out, whether that's something that has to be literal versus imagined, and how you've kind of navigated that side of things.
So growing up, I was raised for the first part of my life in Switzerland.
Where in Switzerland?
In Lausanne. It's like a French speaking.
Okay, I know it kind of well, yeah. One of my friends is a professor at Cal, so I've been there a lot, actually.
Oh my God, cool. Yeah, I mean, there's tons of mushrooms there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I also know the Alps kind of well, too. I spent a lot of time in the Upper Engadine Valley.
Oh, really? Yeah, that's where I learned how to ski when I was young. Yeah, it's nice. But whenever I go back as an adult, I kind of realize, oh, this is why I love nature. And this is why I believe in mushrooms and fairies, because everything's like moss covered and very like elf gnome energy. And you just feel like the mysticism of life and the natural world when you go. And it's funny, like you mentioned living in New York, because it's like quite literally the opposite of that. It's like very concrete and, there's not a lot of nature, especially like wild type of nature, and more like, less curated or, not just like a park that's like a few blocks wide. But I do get inspired by a lot of different things. Like one thing that I do get inspired in New York by is when I see like a little plant that's coming out of the crack of a sidewalk. I think that's such a beautiful moment that like no one is like talking about how like special that is, that even like though we've like paved over all this soil and completely like built a man-made situation in this city, there's still like moments where like these little like sprouts of green plants can come through like cracks, and it's just such a beautiful like small detail of life, but so important. And I think it, there's a lot of like symbolism there for me, like that nature always like will thrive no matter what. And I just really like look up to that as a person, because I feel like life is kind of like that. Like you get thrown a lot of things your way and you just kind of have to keep showing up and keep being present to your own life. And that's how you get over obstacles. And that's how you build yourself as a human being. And I think we're a lot like plants like that. And people play into this idea that we're not the same. Or like, like there's like this idea that like humans are more intelligent than plants. And I actually don't feel like that. Like, I think plants are just as smart as us. I think we're all like in an ecosystem and we're all on an equal level of existing. And there's just like this like respect, I guess, I have for Mother Nature. And that really inspires me as a person and yeah, as an artist too.
Yeah, I mean, there's this Frank O'Hara line where he says, one need never leave the confines of New York to get all the greenery that one wishes. And for me, I've always felt kind of like you, where the appreciation for nature, on one level, you can gain it from being immersed in it. You know, if you're in some kind of really lush greenery, it's easy to be kind of overtaken with how beautiful it is. But there's, on the opposite end of that spectrum, seeing, as you mentioned, a plant growing out of concrete or a patch of moss growing on the side of a building, or the way that trees can integrate signs if they're around each other long enough. There's something really reaffirming, I think, and in both cases, they speak to presence, ultimately, you know, an appreciation for what's in front of you.
Yeah, exactly. And like, even if you think about it in terms of color, right? Like, I feel like plants are usually mostly green or like vibrant colors. And something I'm really inspired by too is just the idea of perception through our own eyes. Like the fact that we're perceiving even this Zoom call visually on our computers, like you're both looking at your own devices. I'm looking at this device, like, and then we're meeting in the middle and we're all able to have this conversation. Like, I just think it's such a wild thing that no one really talks about. And the way that plants fit into that for me are like, they're these bursts of like beautiful, vibrant colors that subconsciously, I think, are very like meditative and spiritual and cathartic to like see in your own visual perception. So even if it's like one tiny dandelion at the side of a street, the fact that you've seen that in your day or in your current perception is like healing. And that's what I think. It's like healing for me. And just to see those like colors in my own eyesight kind of bring out something that is very harmonious.
We were talking about your experience studying art, but maybe we can talk a little bit about how you kind of transitioned from the performance and video work into jewelry making as a point of focus. And it seems that a major turning point as far as that goes was the course that you took at Central St. Martin's. Can you talk a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, so I had just been curious because I went to Parsons and loved it. And I always thought about Central St. Martin's as a school because I kind of knew it was like the equivalent version in Europe. And I really wanted to test it out. So I found this short intensive class for experimental jewelry. It was like 5 days long. And I was like, this is perfect. I can go do my first like solo trip and kind of have this new experience. And I got there, I took the class. Basically, we only had like 2 or 3 assignments for 5 days. And I ended up making like 20 different things because I was just loving working with my hands and experimenting with like all these different like mechanical tools that are kind of intimidating to look at, and something about also being a girl and in this environment where it's not about how you look, it's not about what you're wearing, it's about what you're making, and that's it, is very cathartic and very like freeing. So I really fell in love with the process of it. And honestly, I didn't think about it after. I was kind of like, okay, like, I guess I did that. I'm not planning to make more jewelry. And it was basically my mom that told me I should keep looking into that as something that I should do. And I was like, why not? If someone else is seeing something in what I'm doing, I might as well explore that and see if there's something there for me as an artist that I can latch onto. Because you know, I had been trying out many different mediums as an artist, and I hadn't found one that I felt like other people really understood me in. And so I was kind of in this place where I was looking for the it medium for myself. And basically, I had this idea later on after that class about making weird pearl necklaces, because I had purchased a vintage fake pearl necklace with a giant cross, a very heavy one that I still wear every day for the past like 5 years. And that necklace just transformed my entire closet. Like every time I would wear it, no matter if I'm wearing it with a white shirt or with a fancier top or with something more eclectic, it was as important as a haircut. And what I mean by that is if I had a mullet right now, how you would perceive me and how you perceive my personal style would be very different than the current haircut I have. And I think jewelry is a lot like haircuts, where if you have a really powerful statement necklace, you perceive the entire self-expression of that outfit and that person's energy in a very different way. So I kind of, I saw it as like maybe like a tool that I could give to other people to help express themselves in ways that they wouldn't usually do so. And I kind of merged that concept with this like pearl necklace idea. I broke apart a few old charm bracelets that my mom gave me and collaged basically all these beads together. I used to work at Vogue. That was like my first job out of school. And I had quit Vogue by that time, but all the old editors like bought them like overnight when I posted them on my story on Instagram. And that just like made me understand that there was something there to what I was doing where people were understanding it. And it felt like the first time as an artist that I didn't need to explain my work for people to get it, you know? So I liked that immediacy with it.
There's like a transfer of energy there.
Yeah.
You're giving something to someone that is visible to them, that they understand on a very intuitive level.
Exactly. And it's kind of related back to what I was saying about like the idea of perception and just seeing like a plant and it's green and having that one moment where you like consume something that's that hue of green that makes you happy. It's the same thing that I'm trying to do with my necklaces, where it just changes your perception of yourself. Even if it's a subconscious reaction, it's not something you need to like confront within yourself. Subconsciously, the fact that you're wearing maybe something chunkier than you usually ever would, or something more colorful or slightly more eclectic, deep down will like bring out different energies in you and bring out different mindsets and maybe make you realize more about yourself in an area that you wouldn't usually explore. And that's really powerful for me. And that's why I still do it to this day.
What was that moment like when you transitioned out of having like a formal job to doing your own practice?
It was so scary. Basically, I was working at the time at Helmut Lang as a graphic designer. And I had started my brand the same day I had started that job, like a year back. I'd been there for 1 year. And COVID happened. And then I got furloughed. And low key in the back of my mind, I was just like, this is it. Like, this is the one opportunity I have to prove it to myself that I can do this brand full time. And the world kind of gave me space and time to finally prioritize it and work full time on it. You know, I think I'd started quarantine, like the first quarantine with like, I had like 3,000 followers on Beepy Bella, and it had been a very slow growth. And I think it was like 2 months into being full time, I already was at like 12K and like was quickly spiraling. You know, opportunities were coming with that. And my team had asked me to come back to Helmut. And, you know, even though I love that job and it was a dream job for, you know, being creative and working in fashion, I like quit during that time, which felt really crazy because that's when a lot of people were getting laid off. And, you know, I didn't know if I could like really pull this off and if there's any longevity to what I was doing. But I figured it was now or never because I'm 25 now. I think it was like 24 at the time. And, you know, I'm young enough where I don't have a family to feed right now. So I can, you know, take more risks. And I was just like, I have to do it. I have to try and, you know, take a leap of faith. And yeah, here we are now. So it's definitely like paid off.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was scary though.
You know, and I'm sure it's been fun to see just through Instagram and, you know, whatever else, how the brand has evolved. But I think one of the things that was interesting is that from the outset, it really did seem like a kind of cohesive presentation and a really self-realized, not just a brand, but like an entity that was evolving in real time. And so I know you've spoken elsewhere about Beepy in terms of world building, which is, you know, a popular catchphrase in brand marketing. But I think in this case, as I was saying, it does seem to be more of like a literal intention where you're using the brand almost as a conduit, you know, as an embodiment, a means of accessing something else, this other place with its own visual language and embodied values. How would you describe the world that you're trying to cultivate with the brand?
Imaginary worlds have always really inspired me. And that's part of where I see like fairies coming from, and mushrooms and frogs. Like all these symbols are from the world, and they're just the language of this world. But the world exists within myself, and it's a very personal thing for me because it's something that's been my whole life. It's been a kind of, I don't want to say a coping mechanism, but it's just been, it's why I'm an artist, is because I have this inner utopia that I participate in just as much as I participate in my own reality. I do in this intangible world, whether I'm posting on Instagram or not, whether people are watching me or not. Like, I'd be making the same exact thing if I had 0 followers right now. And that's the truth. You know, like, it doesn't matter. Like, I don't care that there's an audience. I care about what I'm learning as like a human that's growing and existing and aging, and learning more about myself as the day goes on. And I think that's been a really interesting thing for me, like the transition from being like a child into an adult, because often I feel like you're supposed to like kind of lose that childhood curiosity, lose the idea that maybe like fairies could exist or unicorns are real, or maybe you saw a shooting star. And to me, those are like some of the most magical, fruitful moments of life, and some of the most creative moments of life. And I think the reason why it's such a personal relationship I have to the way I make my work is because nothing else is depending on it other than the fact that I want to feel the same way I felt like when I was 5 years old about creativity and about life's boundlessness. And, you know, part of why I like nature and going into nature is because you can really roam free in your mind. Like, you can look at a tree and think about what it's seen and get lost in the abyss of layers of nature and all the details, every color on leaves, every smell, every sound. It's so sensory. And I want to create an environment like that for people. When they look at my brand, I want them to see a world that is inviting and friendly, and that they can place their own perception onto and have freedom to roam around and be themselves in it and add to it. And maybe just enjoy something that someone else is making because they just like simply love to make it. And I think that's why it's funny that I happen to be like in a commercial space. And that's why I say I like kind of hijack it, because it's what I'm doing has nothing to do with business. It just happens to be operating as a business. So world building is kind of that for me.
Do you think there's a relationship of that sort of that generosity on your part, this desire to share something that is so meaningful to you with an audience, correlating to the amount of immediate success that you've had? I think that like in a sense that people can sense that sort of genuine authenticity, and also like, yeah, the generosity that comes with you sharing something like so personal, and something that comes from a place of like, I think there's a lot of hopefulness. Like, you want to give people something that makes their life better or more beautiful. And people are connecting with that.
Yeah, it does feel like I'm trying to give something, and it's like a form of love. And I think that's my love language, is like giving things, even to like friends. Like, I love like giving them gifts all the time. I love making people feel heard and understood and loved unconditionally, because I think a lot of us have insecurities. A lot of us have anxiety and reasons why we act certain ways, even in social or friendships or relationships. And, you know, I just feel like if I could just help someone feel more seen or understood or loved in 1 second, and you never know where that's going to lead for them. Like, maybe you smile at a stranger and it makes their day, and it could change like the whole energy of their entire like trajectory of that day without you even realizing it. So I think moments like that where you can share and you can provide something that you find beautiful is really important to do, because it can like help other people feel excited and loved, which is the best feeling ever.
Yeah, I mean, I love this idea of channeling an internal world and manifesting it externally and physically, and kind of building community through that process. But along similar lines, I feel like your brand has also given me an opportunity to kind of reevaluate my sense of what the word escapism means. I feel like there are connotations to that word, that would suggest avoidance or distraction or kind of a willful detachment from what's in front of you. But I think through your brand, you've been putting across a different kind of suggestion, which is that exploring one's imagination, staying in touch with a sense of wonder can be a great source of pleasure and of presence. It can bring new ideas, and it can even be a source of healing. To me, that's been a really reaffirming and actually eye-opening thing.
Yeah, word for word, that's exactly it. That's how I feel about imagination and creativity, and why I mentioned, how when we're children, we're kind of encouraged to think beyond the lines, and we're constantly being told that, our imagination is endless. We can believe in anything we want and make our dreams come true. And I don't think that should all stop just because we age. I feel like it can age with us, and we can keep that basis of that foundational thought of creative freedom and creative liberation in our daily lives as adults. And I think it's important to have those kind of curiosities, and don't limit yourself, because who knows what you find once you look around the corner and, it's not somewhere you would have usually looked. Maybe there's something there waiting for you. You never know. So I think life is very mysterious. And I think the more that we can be open and embrace that aspect of it, then the more we can learn from it and about ourselves.
Do you think at its core, this sort of, foundational energy that you're talking about, this thing that kind of is consistently running through, whether it's the plant life that you're engaging with or the community that you're engaging with, and sort of non-hierarchical relationship to mediums, and there seems to be this ecological sort of openness and oneness to the way you view the world. Do you think there's a way to articulate that singular thing, or is it something that can only be known by being felt? You had said in the beginning of our conversation, you have this different relationship or way of looking at energy or magic. I think that maybe that's a way of touching on it. What do those things mean to you? Is there a way of putting that into words, or is that something that you've only found through kind of experience and knowing and being?
I think it's what I find through self-expression. The way I know that I can try to communicate these types of thoughts is through different art forms, whether it's poetry or words I'm writing while I'm taking, a walk, or, for instance, different colors I use, the way I bead my necklaces, maybe the language I use on emails, including weird text art unicorns on our customer feedback page, things like that. It's all in the details. But to answer your question more literally, the whole concept of creative freedom is, for me, means that also it's also really subjective, and anyone can place their own meanings and their own interpretation of what the world that they imagine, in their inner head with childlike curiosity. It can all vary, and it's all very different. So that's why I make sure to keep my definition and my perception of that very open-ended. And I always mention that, anyone can place their own visions onto it, because I don't think it's a one-sided or a one-word answer. I think it's anything that anyone feels is important or special to them. It's what makes their life magical, and anything that makes anyone's lives feel a little bit more magical, to me, is what that is, that feeling, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, totally. I think you're making space for people.
Yeah.
I think that comes back to the notions of unconditional love. You're allowing people to exist on their own terms, and you're sort of bringing your personal experience, your narrative to the table, but also making space for them to meet you halfway. Again, it comes back to being a very generous artist.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I'm not going to define anything. I'm not going to say just because this works for me, it's going to work for you. I think the best thing about life is that we all have our own individual mentalities in our own brains that have experienced our own unique experiences. Someone's utopia in their inner world could be super inspirational to mine, and vice versa. And I think the more the merrier. It's an open-ended book and we're all writing it together. And you can quote me on that.
Cool. The Abundant Scene podcast is produced by Ryan Leahy. Our theme music is by Casper Bjork.
You can read and listen to all of our conversations at abundancezine.com. Follow us on Instagram at abundancezine, and be sure to like and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
Thanks for listening.